Hello again. This time we're here and we're going to talk about student loans. So we're actually not going to do any problems on student loans. We're not actually going to work any problems out. Mostly, we're just going to talk about student loans and some facts about them, and some different types of student loans. And we will talk about how you could do problems on them, but we're not actually going to bother actually doing any of those problems. So let's go ahead and get into some facts about student loans. I'll be blunt. These facts are meant to scare you. Student loans can be very scary. Some people can get in a lot of debt from student loans, and it's very you got to be very careful with these. So just some facts. These may be a little bit. Some of these may be a little bit outdated, but they tend not to change that much. Um, they actually scarily they tend not to even get better over time, starting with total student debt is 1.56 trillion. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was a 2016 statistic, so if anything it's gone up since then. Um, Moreover, the average 2016 graduate left college with $37,000 in student debt. So yeah, school costs a certain amount of money, and maybe they got scholarships or grants or things like that. But a lot of people had to take out loans, and on average, the average student took out $37,000. Um, and then in terms of now sort of getting into how these are paid off, basically one third of adults under the age of 30 still have their student loans. But then what's actually even scarier is that if you look at adults that have a bachelor's degree, so those who have gone to a 4-year university, half of them under the age of 30 still have their student loans. So, any young adult that you see, basically every other young adult that you see still has student loans left to pay off. The average monthly payment on student loans is just under $400. That kind of corresponds to this 37,000. But on average, you're in your 20s. You're in your mid to late 20s, and you're paying off $400 a month to student loans. Presumably you have a car too, and you have insurance on that car, and you have a monthly payment on that car, and all that can really add up. So, yeah, the average student loan monthly payment is about $400. 1 in 6 borrowers of student loans are currently in default, which basically is a fancy way of saying they can't make their payments. We could get more detailed about what default actually means, but we don't need to bother with that. Basically, it's just saying, hey, 1 in every 6 people who have student loans just they can't make their payments. They this monthly payment of or this average monthly payment or whatever their monthly payment is, they just can't make it, and so they end up getting into sticky situations there. And then this last point here, I haven't listed this as a statistic. There are statistics out there for it. Um, this seems almost like an opinion piece that I'm writing in, but it is not an opinion. There are actually stats on here. Just didn't bother like putting an actual like percentage or a number or anything on it. Um, but basically, uh, this is actually sort of a good thing about student loan. Well, maybe not about student loans, but a lot of people get scared about student loans. They say, "Well, I don't want to go to college because I don't want student loans." And it actually turns out that those who go to college and take out student loans, they actually are more likely to live in a high income family than those that don't go to college and get their degree. So yes, all of this is scary, but don't let it sway you from the idea of going to college. Don't tell yourself, "Oh, well, I don't want to go to college because I'm going to have to take out student loans." It turns out that if you go to college and even though you have student loans, you actually that degree that you get is kind of worth more than the loans that you have to pay off, and you're more likely to live in a higher income family than those who don't bother going to college. Um, now obviously this has its, you want to be careful here. If you're going to go to college and you're going to have to borrow $300,000, that's a bit different. That's a different scenario than we're talking about. if you're going to go to college and you don't have to borrow anything, well, then yeah, you should go to college because that degree is going to be worth a lot down the line. But if you're in a scenario where you just can't pay anything for college, you don't get any scholarships, you don't have any grants, nothing like that, and you're going to have to borrow 200, $300,000 to go. That might be a little bit scary. You might want to wait a little bit, get some money first, or work on getting some scholarships before, because that's going to be a lot of student loans. I mean, your monthly payment is going to be a lot if you're borrowing $200,000, $300,000. So yeah, so just some facts about student loans here, but also just a sort of a disclaimer saying, hey, don't let these student loans sway you from not going to college. It's definitely better to go to college and get student loans than not go to college. Yeah, so there's some facts on student loans. Let's look at types of student loans here. So um, student loans can be one of two types. They can be subsidized or they can be unsubsidized. And unsubsidized are bad. These are bad student loans. You want to avoid these at all costs. Um, on a subsidized loan, interest does not accrue while you are in school. And that's good because you're borrowing money, and then while you're in school, this the subsidized loan, it will not accrue interest, so you don't have to worry about making payments while you're in school. On an unsubsidized loan, interest actually does accrue while you are in school. While you're taking classes and doing all that, interest will accrue. You don't have to make monthly payments on it, but the amount that you borrowed, you're gaining interest on it, so the amount that you owe is increasing while you're in school, which is obviously not good. So always try to go for subsidized as opposed to unsubsidized. Typically what happens is schools will give you as much subsidized loans as they're allowed to legally, and then if you still need more to pay off the cost, then they'll sort of dip into unsubsidized loans. So generally you'll just get subsidized loans first and then wrap it up with unsubsidized. Yeah. So then in terms of deferment, so actually what happens when you graduate, these subsidized loans, the loans that weren't accruing interest while you're in school, typically what they say is, all right, you just graduated. We're going to give you 6 months of sort of a grace period where we're going to defer your payments. So you kind of have 6 months after you graduate to kind of get your act together and, have a job and be able to make these payments. And so generally at 6 months, it could be a year, it could be nothing. They don't have to do this, but typically student loan payments are deferred for 6 months so that you don't have to actually make any loan payments for 6 months after you graduate. What is also interesting is that if you go into another type of school, like if you go to graduate school or if you go to med school or law school or something like that, your deferment can actually extend. So I'll use myself as an example. I graduated from undergrad. I got my bachelor's degree, and then I continued on into graduate school immediately. I didn't take any time off. I just went right into graduate school. And so my student loans, my subsidized student loans, those actually didn't accrue interest until I graduated, actually until 6 months after I graduated from grad school. And so I had a lot of time to start sort of making payments and getting to the point where I could make these monthly payments because I didn't have to make any monthly payments until 6 months after I graduated graduate school. Um, my unsubsidized loans, interest accrued while I was in graduate school, but I didn't have to make payments, and that was kind of the big thing. Being a grad student, I didn't have a whole lot of leeway in my finances to make a $400 monthly payment or something like that, and so that was nice. Yeah. Also, what's interesting, and I don't have this written here, but I'll mention it. In certain cases, student loans can actually get canceled. Um, Now, an obvious case here is like if you die, then that's sort of the well, for lack of a better word, it's the easiest way of canceling your payments is, well, if you die and you can't make your payments anymore, then they cancel them. But there are other ways that you can do this, and some of them actually have to do with the job that you take. So sometimes if you go into teaching, certain jobs, teaching being one of them, they'll actually cancel your student loan, part of your student loans, year by year if you do that. So take a look into some of that. Obviously, you probably don't want to change, your life goals or your career choices just so that your student loans get canceled. But if you're kind of going down that line where maybe you want to be a teacher, maybe you want to work in a certain field, it's good to note that maybe your student loans can get canceled in those cases. So be aware of that. These are the types of student loans and some little facts about them and how they work. Um, as I've said, we're not going to do actual problems on student loans, but I do want to mention on how you would calculate your monthly payment. And it's actually the same exact formula as with mortgages. This is the installment loan uh, formula that we've seen before. And a student loan is an installment loan. It's a loan that you're borrowing money and then you're paying it back monthly in installments right there. And so we use this formula here. It is the same calculation as mortgages. Obviously, if you have an unsubsidized loan, interest can and will, if it's an unsubsidized loan, it will accrue while you're in school. So that makes these problems a little bit more difficult. As I've said, we won't worry about any of those problems, but it's good to just sort of recognize that it is actually pretty easy to calculate how much how much your monthly payments would be given just, hey, how much should I borrow, and let's calculate what my monthly payments are. So that's going to be it on student loans, and that'll be it for the lecture.